still cry because I think about those people telling me their stories. And I don't like to talk about it very much because there's a lot of pain. And most of those people are probably dead now. The people I knew at Gila River are dead. The people I knew in Arkansas are dead. At Heart Mountain, yeah, they're all passed on already.
This is Eric Carr, a volunteer interviewer with the Kisuna Project. It is March 28th, 2026, and I am in Tucson with Carolyn. Do I have permission to record you?
Yes, you do.
Let's start off with some basic information. When and where were you born?
1952 in Kapa'au, Hawaii.
And how did your family's experience with incarceration and in Hawaii with martial law affect you?
I think I'll start telling you about the grandparents. Before the Kingdom of Hawaii fell, my grandfather Hyakuji and my grandmother Tai Sugiyama came from Hiroshima, Japan. It's the Empire of Japan to the Kingdom of Hawaii. They came as indentured servants on the sugar plantation. So these were impoverished people traveling third class in the bottom of a boat to Hawaii. And after they landed, Grandpa and Grandma had 8 children on the sugar plantations. I think they worked on 2 plantations. They were both laborers in the field, so this was rough, grueling work. And Grandma did it even with 8 children. And my father was the last of the 8. And they called him Sueo, which means last. So he was, growing up, he was Sueo Sugiyama. And everyone worked on the sugar plantation, so he did some work too. But he graduated from Kohala High School on the Big Island of Hawaii, and then he worked for a number of years because he was too poor to go to college. Remember, these were very poor people. So, and they had nothing. They had no house, they had nothing. So my father went on to the University of Hawaii, and he wanted to become a dentist. And he was the first, I believe, in his family to go to college. So he was the first generation. Then he was at the University of Hawaii at Manoa for a couple of years. Then he went on to University of Southern California for dental school. And that's when Pearl Harbor happened. So this is how the family was affected by Pearl Harbor, is that he was there in Los Angeles, and USC expelled all their Japanese American students in that spring before the roundup. So my father was expelled, and here's a picture of him. This is happier times, of course. He's standing there in LA, and he was fortunate in the sense that instead of being interned, he got one of the 500 voluntary passes that General DeWitt's people issued, and he fled with what he could carry to Chicago by train. And a very nice Jewish lady kept his stuff in LA and shipped it to him later. Then he went on in Chicago, having escaped the relocation, the camps, and he said that later to me, that he was fortunate that he was not interned. So he was in Chicago, he took classes at Loyola, was a postal clerk, and reapplied for dental school. He got in years later to the University of Maryland in Baltimore. And remember, there was no racism against him as a Japanese American in Chicago or Baltimore. And meanwhile, everybody else were in the camps, the 10 large relocation camps and smaller FBI ones. So my father, fortunately, was happy and lucky, and he was in Baltimore. He got his dental degree, came back to Hawaii, to the very village that he was born in, and married my mother, who was a nurse there, and had us kids. There were 3 of us. Okay, so I hear this story from my father along the way. And I say, wow, because I asked him, how did you get to the University of Maryland, of all places, you know, when you were at USC? And so he told me what happened. So I knew that this injustice had been done by USC to my father and all the others, because he said everyone else he knew was also expelled in different disciplines, not just at dental school. And so then I grow up, I go to law school in Boston, and I hear more about the relocation, and I learn, you know, I learned much more at that time. Then one day I decide to go to work for Danny Noy, and that's the other part of the story. So the question always is, how did you know Danny Noy? Danny Noy, when I was born, is like 20 years older. He was already a congressman from Hawaii. He, before he became a congressman from Hawaii, had married my first cousin, Maggie Aramura. Maggie's mother is my father's oldest sister. This is a picture later of my father and Omitsu, Danny Noy's mother-in-law. Okay, so I grew up with that story too. I know that Danny Noy's in our family, and we meet him, and he came to my older brother's high school graduation. So I go to work for Danny Noy. This is January 1979. And I had only heard about the relocation in law school, but Danny Noy's working on it because the redress movement is in full swing. JACL, the Japanese American Citizens League, is pushing for redress. And I arrive, and I'm this young attorney. I'm a young Sansei attorney with a lot of enthusiasm, and they give me civil rights. And of course, this topic falls into civil rights. And so there I am, and this is my issue. And I started learning a lot. I started talking to people. I interview internees. Now remember, this is 1979. Time has passed. Many Issei have already died. Nisei too who are in the camps. So anyway, Danny Noy is the senior senator from Hawaii. Spark Matsunaga is also there. And there's S.I. Hayakawa, a Republican senator from California. S.I. Hayakawa had already come out against the camps. He said, oh, these were summer camps, and they were enjoyable. And so Danny Noy and Spark Matsunaga knew that with him being so vocal, they were not going to get redress passed. So I went with them, the three senators actually in Hayakawa's office. We're sitting there, and they're all looking at each other, and Danny Noy knows that it's not going to happen. So we leave that meeting, and we actually ride the elevator down from S.I. Hayakawa's office, and he slumps in the corner, the senator, and he says, "Ask why hard," which is a pidgin Hawaiian term, which means that's why it's so hard. So he was telling me, because I'm from Hawaii too, that this was not going to be easy. So then we have a high-level meeting with JACL, their national office, their Washington, D.C. folks, and they're still pushing for redress. And the senator tells them, no, we can't do it now because of S.I. Hayakawa. He said, so the senator tells them he wants to go for a national commission to study the whole issue. And they go back and they meet, and JACL finally decides to go with the senator and Sparky on this. So then it becomes my job to write up the bill, because I'm the aide. I'm doing this issue. So we write up the bill. It's called, and we introduce it in the Senate. It's S-1647, and it's my name. I come up with the commission's name. I was talking to my interns actually one day, and I said, let's call it the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians. I said, I want the word civilians because this was not military people who were put away in the camps. I'm going to call it wartime because we're not going to deal with peacetime relocation. It was a wartime effort, of course, by FDR with the executive order 9066. And I threw in the word relocation because of people like my father who were forced out and the people, all the people, the 120,000 who were put away in camps. So that's my basic work there at the Senate.
You mentioned your father was able to escape the incarceration camps, but being from Hawaii, did you have other family members that were incarcerated or were affected by the laws that were passed in Hawaii?
Right. Fortunately, because Hawaii had such a huge Japanese American population, they couldn't round up all the people. Hawaii might have been 40% Japanese American at that time. A lot of Nisei were very successful people. So Hawaii had about 1,000 people, mostly the business and religious leaders who were rounded up. And one was a Buddhist priest relative of our family. He was the sensei, the priest at the Waimea Honganji, and he was taken by the FBI and shipped off via the Honouliuli camp on to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where he remained. And then my other uncle, who was in Honolulu, joined the 442nd, those people who volunteered, and he became a medic. He eventually married the daughter of that Buddhist priest that I mentioned. And that's how, we knew more about what happened to poor Sensei Oye. So yes, some people were affected.
Can you tell Sensei Oye's story?
I don't know that much about, you mean what happened to him? Yes, after he went to Santa Fe, he stayed there. He couldn't see his wife and 6 daughters ever again. They were all on the island of Kauai. Nobody had airfare to go visit anybody now. These were people who were imprisoned with no due process of law. And there was no due process of law for any of these folks. So he stayed in Santa Fe, and then unfortunately, he repatriated. They were given a choice of repatriating to Japan or staying in the camp and not seeing his family. So he chose to go back to Osaka, and then he was killed in the bombing of July 1945, just before the war was ending. So he never got back to Hawaii and his family. So so that's my cousin and my auntie, and they grew up without their father and their grandfather. So it's I didn't know that story till later either. What had happened to Sensei Oye?
Do you think, had you not had a politician in the family, would you have gone into this because of your dad's experience? Would you have had that same kind of passion?
No, I didn't. I knew about the camps, but I didn't have that passion until I landed in Danny Inouye's office. And then it all came back to me about my father. And I talked to my father. He said, oh my goodness. Because the people in Hawaii didn't know that much about the redress movement because they were not involved. Remember, all these, my Nisei aunties and uncles and cousins, nobody knew much about the relocation and the internment. So no, it was just kind of thrust onto me. Oh, and also the aide who had been handling that Japanese American redress issue, she had just quit. So that's why it fell into my lap. And so my father's story and meeting all these people and hearing their stories began to fuel me. And then I knew that I had to do something. So of course I'm working with JACL, and back then there was no internet. So all the contact about the legislation was also introduced on the House side too, of course, was about writing letters or phone calls to the senators and congressmen. So a whole year goes by, and there's letters, and a lot of people are writing in. I start rallying people in the 10 major states. I sat there and I figured, what am I going to do to lobby this effort from the inside? So I did do that. I started calling Japanese American groups in Washington, Idaho, Colorado, and the veterans came on. Then civil rights groups came on, and we're getting more and more mail. I used to have a huge stack of mail for the senator to sign because he had to write back to everyone who wrote in about this issue. So I'm generating this issue. It's growing, but it's frustrating. A year goes by. It's passed the House, but I can't get it to pass in the Senate. So one day, this is another good story, one day I'm walking in one of the Senate hallways. I think it's the Russell Senate office building. And there's the senator and there's me, and we're walking, and he comes up to me and he says, there's nobody else around, which is unusual. He says to me, how's the bill going? And I said, Senator, I can't even get a hearing. We need to get it to the floor. We've got to vote, because I didn't intend to stay in DC long. I didn't like it. This was already a year had gone by, and I knew I wasn't going to stay long. And he says to me, who's the chairman of that committee that it's in? I said, Governmental Affairs, it's Scoop Henry Jackson from the state of Washington. And the senator turns to me and he says, he owes me one. And that's it. He just said that. He owes me one, and he walked on. And I go, okay. The very next day, we get our hearing. Jackson's office calls me and they say, when do you want it? Who do you want to interview? Tell me who's on the list to come and speak. So we throw together the hearing. It would have been a month. The hearing was held on, I think, May 15, 1980. Within like a month, it gets to the Senate floor, and Jackson and the rest of them just push it through. And remember, because it's called the Wartime Relocation, blah, 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 it doesn't mention Japanese Americans, which was my idea too, because I said, I don't want people to know what this is about. I want it to be neutral, innocuous, so that the other Republican senators or people who are racist were going to vote for it, probably not knowing that they were going to fund this commission to study about the relocation. And that's how we did it. And it was just, the momentum was so fast once we got the hearing. Thank you, Scoop Jackson, but he really, in the beginning, was against, he was for interning people. And yeah, that's the secret of what happened back then, but it's okay, it was passed. So Jimmy Carter signs the legislation. So I'm not there in DC anymore. So Danny Noy sends me the picture of the signing. There he is. And here's Norm Mineta, congressman. Here's Spark Matsunaga. Bob Matsui also is not in this picture. He's the other congressman. There are only 4 of them, 4 Japanese, and S.I. Hayakawa. 5 of them. You notice S.I. Hayakawa is not here. Anyway, so Jimmy Carter signs it. I brought the pen, which is sort of beat up now and it's got mold, because this was from 1980. And this is the pen that Jimmy Carter used to sign the legislation. The senator sent this to me. And he says, in a letter to me, he says, for Carolyn Sugiyama, this was your day. And he underlines your, because he knew that I was so passionate. I wasn't going to give up. I really wasn't. I was never going to give up. With much affection and gratitude, aloha, Daniel K. Inouye. So anyway, so that was a very good moment. I was very happy. This was 1980. The bill was passed, but it took another 2 years for the commission to have the hearings. They went to 10 cities, 700, 800 people were interviewed. Then they wrote the book, the commission wrote the book, Personal Justice Denied. And here's what they say, and this is the key passage, page 18. The broad historical causes which shaped those decisions were race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. A grave injustice was done to American citizens and resident aliens of Japanese ancestry, who, without individual review or any probative evidence against them, were excluded, removed, and detained by the United States during World War II. I actually flew up to the San Francisco hearing just to testify about my role, my small role in all this with Danny Noy. And there are tapes out there with the recording of the testimonies, and they're very, very heart-wrenching to listen to about the people. And people give me these things because they want, me to keep it in my library. So, okay, so the report comes out, it's 1982, but it takes JCL and everybody else another 6 years to get redress until Ronald Reagan finally issues an apology in 1988. And they passed the Civil Liberties Act, which gives the $20,000 to each internee. But my heart was so sad because I thought of all the Issei and Nisei who had died already. You know, it was bad back in 1980. This is 1988. Okay, so lots of people got the redress, so thank God for that. And time moved on. Danny Noy dies. I keep in touch with Danny Noy. He dies. He becomes president pro tempore of the Senate, which is the third ranking member of the US Senate. So he actually is the highest ranking, was the highest ranking Japanese American politician in America. He and I keep in touch. Then he dies December 2012. He passes away. We go to his funeral on the Big Island. My mother is still alive, so she's his aunt. So we go to the funeral, which is an end of an era, you know, when a man like Danny Noy dies. Then, out of the blue, the story goes on, in 80 years after the roundup, remember the roundup was 1942, 80 years later, USC writes to me. They find me. I don't know how they found me. And they say that they want to apologize to all the people that they expelled, and that they were going to build a tribute garden on the USC campus and give us give my father and the rest of the descendants in memory of their fathers or mothers. I think it was mostly fathers though. I don't know how many were women, but, you know, who had been excluded. I only found out then that 127 people, students, had been expelled from USC. We never knew that. We didn't know how many had been. I knew there were at least 9, but I didn't know it was that many. Anyway, so USC gives him this certificate. It's an honorary baccalaureate, and it was unfortunately given on April 1st, 2022. But anyway, so my father would have been proud. It's signed by the chairman of the board of trustees and the president of the university. And she was very nice. She was there at the ceremonies, and there was a lot of coverage, and mostly in Los Angeles. So fortunately, USC and some other California schools did apologize and do similar things to all the people that they excluded and expelled from, and some of those people were ruined after that. They did not continue on in their studies. In fact, I did meet a young man later at the senator's office who said that his father was one of those other dental students, his grandfather, and he just quit and did not ever pursue his career because he just went back to Honolulu and didn't finish. These are those stories.
In your involvement with so many people who were affected by this, what are some stories that stick out to you?
Oh, the worst ones are the people who say they went to the assembly centers. I think it's Santa Anita in California, and they were the old horse stalls, and there was still the smell and the debris of horse manure and stuff. Or the people who told me about the communal toilets, that there were just a line of toilets in a row, and they had to sit down next to other people and use a toilet. You know, these stories. When I heard that, and I've seen pictures of them and all that too, it was just overwhelming. Story after story about how horrible it was. Bob Matsui, the congressman, told us he had problems in his ear because he didn't get medical attention when he had an ear infection. So he had a hearing aid, you know, and he's the congressman from California. Yeah, it was those heartbreaking stories about the lack of cleanliness, the public humiliation, the lack of medical care. You know, all on US soil. People, when I was trying to push this bill through over on the House side, people would come up to me and say, oh, no, this was enemy combatants. This was not on US soil. I said, no, these were the 10 large camps right here on our soil. There was so much misinformation. And of course, still racism against Japanese Americans. So people would just dismiss me, one of the congressmen, I don't know who, one of the congressman's chief of staff on the other side tried to get me fired. They called our chief of staff and told Henry, fire her, she's bothering us too much. And so he calls me in, he says, who are you talking to over there? And I told him, and he says, keep bothering them. But you know, I mean, because they tried to get me fired, of course, because I was pushing them too hard and I wanted to get it passed. I had to get it passed.
You were so personally involved in this and actually wrote this yourself. And then you had to entrust it to all of these people, and you worked so hard to get so many people to get involved, to write the letters that you were talking about. Did you ever have a time where you realized that you were getting close to a tipping point, or that it really would be possible?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, because it was on my back. It felt that. The senator called me in one day and he said to me that this was not a popular issue back home in Hawaii because not a lot of people had been interned. So he was getting flack too. And he said to me, you know, just like feeling it out, like, what are we going to do about this legislation? You know, are you going to keep pushing so hard for it? And I said, Senator, we have to do it. You know, I mean, I'm thinking of my father too, you know, of course. But I said, we just have to. And he goes, okay. You know, because, you know, he had to go back and hear flack from his constituents in Honolulu that he was wasting his time or whatever they were saying to him. I mean, I didn't hear that much from the people in Hawaii. I didn't want to hear it. But he told me it's not a popular issue back home. You know, and he, you know, he's running for re-election all the time and he's always campaigning. So I said, no, we just have to do it. I wasn't going to back down. I mean, I really wasn't. I had only one purpose then. But I could give it away. It's amazing. You know, when I left, I was, okay, I'm just going to hand it back to JCL, and they're just going to move forward. Because remember, JCL wanted that money in the first place. They were not happy that they had to lose 2 years to do this commission. But in the ultimate, everybody started quoting the commission's report. You know, they're saying, because of this, we have to do this. So, no, it was okay handing it on to someone else. I felt like I had done my job. That was all I can do.
You mentioned before the interview about how your family has held on to this idea about USC. Can you tell that story?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We were all angry at USC. I mean, after they expelled my father, he had to flee to Chicago. He had to suffer in the cold. Remember, he's coming from Hawaii. He wanted to stay in LA. He had to live in Chicago and then Baltimore. So he suffered. And yes, we hated USC for years. We would have nothing to do with the Trojans or anything. Even my son, who's a Yonsei, half Yonsei, was kind of USC tried to recruit him from University High School here to go to USC. So when he got the card and the little, you know, solicitation letter from them, he got the card and he wrote on it that you people, whatever he said, expelled my grandfather during World War II because of his race. I didn't see the card, but he told me, he mailed it back and he said, no, I'm not going to USC. So that made me proud because he had been hearing all this. He knew what happened to his grandfather. And he knew that we still hated USC back in 2003 when he graduated from high school. I mean, USC didn't make it up till 2022, 80 years after the relocation.
Did that change your family's perspective on college?
Oh yeah, I've forgiven them. I absolutely have. I mean, I don't know if I would let my granddaughter go to USC. I'm not sure. But yeah, no, it really laid it to rest. I had been angry all those years. My God. It's almost like, how come I was so angry for so long? But I really was angry.
Do you feel like there was a price you paid in carrying that anger?
No, because that's the anger that fueled me when I fell into Danny Noy's office. Because my father flew up, he sat there and he told the senator what happened to him. And they're sitting there, I can see the still, they're sitting there in his office. And this is the senator's uncle now by marriage. And so he's going, yep. You know, because it helps the senator too, you know, to hear all these stories, especially from family members what happened to them during the war. I mean, Danny Noy lost his arm during the war, so he knew a lot about that, the war effort.
With your legal expertise, what are some things that you know about the process that this takes, about the laws that may be dubious laws, or any of that the average person might not know that you think they should?
You know what, even to this day, people don't understand. And some people still try to justify what happened at World War II, relocation and internment. Because people don't understand the lack of the due process. As an attorney, you know this, because they drilled this to you in law school. There was no notice, there were no hearings, there was no conviction. These people were just swept away, as a group. That's the thing I tried to tell people. You can't do that on American soil, but they did. FDR, they allowed that to happen. And that was the most infuriating thing, was the lack of due process. For US, 3/4 were US citizens, 1/4, the other quarter, 3/4 US citizens, 1/4, and so-called enemy aliens, without US citizenship, and 1/4 were children.
How do you feel seeing reverberations of that today?
Oh, it breaks my heart. Seeing these detention centers now in Arizona. Remember, Arizona had 2 internment camps at Gila River and at Poston on Native American reservations. And then to see now detention centers popping up in Arizona, it just breaks my heart. And these people also are not getting any due process. They're just being whisked away, and some of them are dying in detention. So it's amazingly parallel. And these are also brown-skinned people that are being rounded up today.
Do you feel like your perspectives changed when your passion started to grow, as you heard these other stories, as you heard your dad's story, and you're working on this legislation? How did that change you as a person, if at all? I never intended to be somebody that ended up working on the redress movement, I grew up in Hawaii. There's hardly any racism against Japanese Americans in Hawaii. We were the majority, especially on my island. I grew up in a village, as I said, Kapa'au and Hawaii. Most of the people I grew up with were Japanese, Filipino, or Hawaiian. So, I didn't know what racism was really like until I came to the mainland. And it made me stronger because, I heard about the model minority, and a lot of my relatives were very successful people. But when I come to the mainland, I meet people here who were not successful, whose kids are the only Asians in the town. And a lot of these kids have a rough time. The racism is bad, even to this day. Some of the people I know now at the University of Arizona tell me how bad it is to go to Sabino High School, which is a very white school here in town. So you hear that, and I tell you, my heart bleeds for them, because I didn't have that experience. I grew up dominant. I grew up okay. I grew up happy, racially, and I didn't see that until the mainland. We're running out of time for this segment, so thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to cover? No, I think we covered it all. And do you have any wisdom or something that you'd like to share with other people, or especially for the next generation?
The fact that there are detention centers now, which is paralleling what happened back then in 1942 to 45, is very disturbing. It's very disturbing. And I know that there's various Japanese American groups fighting it. I think it's Sudo for Solidarity is out there. But I don't think it's enough. And that's what's scary about what's happening now. And maybe that's why this is still relevant. Because I can tell you, some people really do still believe this was a justifiable internment because of military necessity and because we were at war with Japan. So it's still a very difficult issue today.
One of the key things that you mentioned was writing to these different groups to get them involved when you were lobbying. Do you think that's something that we could learn from today in getting the diversity of
Maybe if Congress gets to decide anything, that's what's going on. Maybe, sure, this definitely. I mean, that's the only way we finally got some attention and some momentum going. I mean, Scoop Jackson must have been hearing from his constituents in Washington to make him finally have the hearing and finally help push it onto the Senate floor. So I think absolutely. Even the Baha'i International Group was helping us. And I didn't know anything about them. And I thought, who are these people? But all kinds of different, religious groups came forward because they were civil libertarians. I think the Quakers came forward too at that time. Because, I just thought I was going to just get anybody and everybody to say we needed to do this. We needed to investigate the wrong that had happened to these people. And I did forget that at one point, Senator Ted Stevens' office called, and they asked me if it was okay if we attached the Alaskan Aleuts onto our bill, because they had also been put into camps. So I asked the senator, he goes, absolutely. He said, we'll make it better. We'll make it, more passable, because that's what he wanted. He just wanted to pass it. So, so that's why, the word began to spread, and that's why we were able to do it.
Is there anything you wish you could have put into the bill or taken out of it in hindsight?
No, it was good. It was just funding for the bill to go out and do its work. Yeah. And the senator did ask me if I wanted to be on the commission, to stay in DC and go out there and listen to testimony. And I went, I can't do that anymore. I couldn't listen to more of this testimony. You can imagine how wrenching it is. No, I said, no, Senator. I said, I'm going home.
Do you think you carried any vicarious trauma from hearing those stories?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I still cry because I think about those people telling me their stories. And I don't like to talk about it very much because, there's a lot of pain. And most of those people are probably dead now. The people I knew at Gila River are dead. The people I knew in Arkansas are dead. At Hart Mountain, they're all passed on already. So I think about them, but their voices are already quiet. They're gone.
At the center of this movement, in the nucleus of it, how many people do you think were really working on this as part of your team to push it through? My team with the senator, it was just him and me in the office. I had a couple of interns, but they came and went because they were either college or, I don't think we had very many high school. No, it was mostly college or maybe law school interns. No, I didn't have any staff. How does that feel, knowing that you contributed to something monumental with just this tiny team?
I just see it as destiny. For some reason, I was just the person that had to be there at that time. I mean, really, like I said, I just walked into the office and there it was. Because I guess I was just that kind of person that could do it, that was smart enough to figure out how to do it in a neutral way, to build up these groups of civil rights people, because I came from law school. So I thank law school for that. Really, I had no staff. It was just me doing all this and pushing and being abrasive to get it done. And the senator said, we're just going to do it. I mean, I don't even think I got much help from Sparky's Matsunaga staff. I mean, they were hearing from the same people, but remember, this was not a big issue in Hawaii. So I don't know what, they weren't talking to me that much about it.
Where do you think that tenacity came from?
I was a young girl growing up in a village in Hawaii with an older brother and a younger brother. And life wasn't bad. I mean, we only had one road into our community. And it was only about 1,000 people, maybe another 1,000 people in the next village. Where did that tenacity come from? I don't know. It was just there. I guess maybe being the tomboy with two brothers in a village running around barefoot, maybe that's where I got some of that from.
So to carry that over into the next portion of our interview to talk about what you're doing now,
Right.
Can you give us an overview of the things that you're doing here in Southern Arizona and how you got into that and how you got here?
I got here because my husband accepted a job in the German Studies Department in 1987. So I've been here quite a while now. So I arrived and time passed. It wasn't until 2012 that I really got involved in the Japanese community. There was a Japan-America Foundation here, but I wasn't very involved in that. I would go to events, but I never did much with them. But then 2012, another Japanese American named Ross Iwamoto he's from Molokai. He's not even from Honolulu. He wanted to get together a coalition of Japanese people because we heard that Yume Gardens was going to open up. So he thought that was a good idea. So we started meeting in 2012, a bunch of us, including retired East Asian Studies professor Min Yanagihashi, who had been running the Japan-America Foundation, and his wife Evelyn. So they're both from Honolulu. So it was actually a whole bunch of us Hawaiians, Japanese Hawaiians, because remember, we're dominant people. We're not people who feel we're minorities. You know, we will do something. So yes, that's right. There was the four of us, and probably M. Craig from the Tucson Origami Club. So we started meeting. We launched the website. It was my idea. I said, folks, what we need is something to pull the community together, and let's do a website. Let's do a clearinghouse of information. Because I knew there was this group and this group and this group, and I knew, maybe we could have some kind of event going on here and there. So yes, so we pitched it. We passed around a basket and we threw money in, just $5, $10. We got $40 together and we launched the website, Southern Arizona Japanese Cultural Coalition. And that's how we started. The same month that Yume Gardens opened, so it was very coincidental. We launched and they opened, and then we just went from there. They started having activities. I started posting, because I became the editor, because I have a media. I was with the Tucson Citizen for a while as a guest columnist, and then I became a blogger for the TucsonCitizen.com. So I had the media background. So I did the website and the listserv and the Facebook page. We created a Facebook page. And so that's how we launched. And that's what we've been doing ever since. Well, I've been doing, spreading news about Japanese, everything to do with Japanese culture and history in Southern Arizona. And then we launched it was also Ross's idea, Ross Iwamoto's idea, to have a Mochizuki in January 2014, a year after we had all launched. So we did a small mochi pounding event at Yume Gardens for 200 people. Some people are still with us from that beginning. And then we got bigger. The next year we moved it to where Odaiko Sonora has its studio. Then we moved it for 3 years to PCC downtown. Every year it started growing by 200 people. And I'm doing publicity because I know the website, I do the publicity. So I've been there from the beginning, from 200 to 400 to 600 to 800 to 1,000. Then it got too big for PCC downtown. We moved it to the Tucson Chinese Cultural Center in 2019. And then you know what happened in 2020 with the COVID. So we had two there at the Chinese Center. Then the COVID came, we missed 3 years. And then we launched again in 2024. So then we had 3 more festivals at the Chinese Center. And now we have 2,000 people.
You also are involved in multiple community projects. You're still blogging too, right?
Yes.
And for Blog for Arizona?
Yes.
And you also are doing other volunteer work and...
For my neighborhood, yes. I do cleanup day, Earth Day cleanup.
Do you feel like your background and the tenacity that you had to have to push through your legislation in your prior vocation has helped you get the ball rolling with these things here in Southern Arizona?
I guess so. Now that you put it that way, I guess so. Because I'm kind of that person that doesn't give up. I just keep going. I've been on my neighborhood board for 22 years, and I don't quit. And I've been with this Japanese coalition since the beginning. And there's only 3 of us now, Min and Evelyn and me, who were there at the beginning. Everybody else has left. Either moved out of town or quit. So we just keep going because, we believe in this.
You also had to work kind of across the aisle and pester the right people, and I know you've had to deal with some pretty big personalities. And do you think that you have to still kind of bring that political mindset into advocating for all of these things here?
Absolutely. This is a purple state. This is not a blue state. Hawaii is very blue. The legislature back home in Hawaii is all Democrats. I think they might have 1 or 2 Republicans. It is totally dominated. It was Barack Obama land. So this is not that in Arizona. It's more difficult here, for sure, to be Japanese American. Sometimes I'm the only Asian person in a room. And, it's just white people and me. And I'm not used to that coming from Hawaii. So and a lot of times white people will talk over me. I have been in many rooms where it's mostly white women. They'll I'll say something which is intelligent and correct, and then a white woman will say it right after me in similar ways, and she gets credit. And they all go, "Oh, great idea." And I'm sitting there, but I said it first. But that's what happens when you're a minority and treated like a minority on the U.S. mainland. So I love going home to Hawaii, because when you go home to Hawaii, you can just blend right back in. And people don't do that to you there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This concludes the interview.